Hey friends, good Monday morning. Welcome to another Monday Motivation. Hope your week's going good here in March. And welcome to part 9 of the Is Collecting Bad series, the penultimate part and the last topical part. Next week we'll wrap this series up. It'll be a 10-part series, a sermon series, if you will, going back to my dad being a minister and going through sermon series with him, where we'll kind of summarize and look back and talk about how it applies going forward. So for today, we're going to get into, is there an end point in collecting? I think this will be a little bit shorter topic. I know some of the last ones have been longer. There's been research and some more psychological things. There won't be quite as much as that in this. It'll be more of an open discussion, right? An introspection and maybe some things to help us all think about what is the end of collecting, and is collecting bad because it just seems to be infinite, right? Endpoint collecting. To summarize, if you've missed any of the parts, is collecting bad? We talked about, are we collecting or are we accumulating? We talked about being addicted. We talked about completionism and having collecting rules and OCD. We talked about the influence of marketing and Saturday morning cartoons and FOMO. We talked about hoarding. We talked about having your priorities right, financially and otherwise. We talked about how other people treat you and what they think. Today, we're going to talk about having an end point in collecting. Now, having an end point, how does my collection stop? How does it end? That truly is the collector's dilemma, isn't it? It's truly the collector's dilemma. It's the hardest question to answer. What's the end? How do you stop collecting? Meaning, how are you finished with a collection? It's easy to stop. We'll talk a little bit about that. But what's the end point? How do you be finished? How is your collection complete? Retro collectors can have an end because they're collecting things that are finite to a certain extent. So I used to only collect retro Playmates Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I collected from 1988 until I think it was 1993, those releases. And then in 93, like the card backs changed completely, like the design, and that was what I focused on. That was the toys that were important to me. So then I had all of them mint on card. Had a complete collection, a lot of them left over from childhood. Well, guess what I did then? Then I said, well, I like collecting. I want to keep collect. How about I get all of them loose? And then I went to try to get all of them loose. And about that time is the time that I ended up needing to sell it off because of some of the reasons we talked about in previous episodes. But then I could say, well, what about the vehicles? And what about the variants? What about the mail-aways? What about the other country version, different cards? What about bootlegs? What about spin-off brands like Cowboys of Moo Mesa? What about other merchandise? What about Ninja Turtles birthday cake plates or Ninja Turtles basketballs or whatever was made, right? Even for the retro, the vintage collector, we can just always find more to collect. And I'm speaking to myself first. I should have just finished when I had the mint and card. Then I started to get the loose. And then I was like, well, maybe I can get all the VHS tapes. And you just kept going. Modern is even harder. Lines seem to never end. When I had my fire sale, I said I'm going to collect G.I. Joe Classified, NECA Turtles, Super 7 Turtles, and the 6-scale Game of Thrones, Walking Dead, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings. That was it. Well, at the time, I had like 12 NECA Ninja Turtles. I had 4 Super 7 Ninja Turtles. I had 6 G.I. Joe Classified. Now I have seemingly hundreds of all of those. And that's just a few years later. The lines exploded, and they're all still going, and they're all putting out variants, and they're all active. So how do you know when to stop collecting a modern line? Is it when the boxes change? Is it when the Star Wars Black Series went from the red on the side to a different color, or when they had like the hexagon shape or whatever, like the angled shape is? They stopped numbering them, or they started the numbering over. With Black Series, is that when you stop? Marvel Legends, is it when Toy Biz became Hasbro and now I collect Hasbro Marvel Legends? Do I only collect Hasbro Marvel Legends that have Build-A-Figures? Do I only collect Hasbro comic characters? Do I only collect Hasbro MCU characters? But although those are infinite, is it when a naming change, when it's no longer called Marvel Legends, now it's called Marvel Collection? I don't have a good word. When do I stop with a modern line? I'm thinking that right now with G.I. Joe Classified. I love the line. I think it's the greatest line going right now in Walmarts and Targets. I have in-box and out-of-box. One of each, if not more. But there's too many. And now there's Tiger Force. And now there's Python Patrol. And then there's Con exclusives and Hasbro Pulse exclusives and vehicle. When do I exit? When is it complete? It's a hard question to ask. Often, collecting ends suddenly and abruptly with a mass liquidation event. We all know that's true. You saw me do it with the fire sale. I didn't stop collecting, but I got a bunch of it out. Suddenly and abruptly, it's got to go. Most recently in our community, if you're in my circle, you saw Josh do it, a full liquidation. I'm getting rid of everything. I'm getting rid of the shelves, the cases. I'm getting rid of the art, the comics, the replicas, all of it. A mass liquidation event over a couple weeks. Why? Because as long as there's something, it makes you want to have something else. So a mass liquidation event. And the challenge of that, I think a challenge for someone like Josh is, where does this end? How do you have an end point? And as long as I keep one thing, I'm going to keep adding things to it. It's like the Hydra. Collecting is like the Hydra. Cut off one head, another head, two heads appear. So how do you find a true end point in collecting? I don't know the answer, but we're going to talk about a few things. First of all, is there truly an end point? I'd say for most of us, for those that are the thousands of people that watch these videos from me on YouTube, are pretty invested in collecting, I would say. And for most of us, there probably isn't. There probably isn't an actual end point of collecting. Why is that? Because we enjoy the act of collecting itself more than we enjoy the collection. We enjoy the act of collecting more than the collection. Maybe it's not we're addicted to purchasing or buying, but we enjoy the finding and acquiring and having a thing that we didn't have before and filling in the gaps and learning about a new rare piece and adding that. And so we enjoy collecting more than the collection. So how does it ever really end? Unless you tire of actually collecting. It goes back to understanding why you collect and what your collection is and what it means to you. There are way too many good things out here in this space. We can't have it all. Even though they want us to have it all. We believe we can have it all. We can't have it all. I started by the Best Action Loyal Subjects Ninja Turtles. 5 years ago, people have said those were great before NECA and Super 7 started putting figures out. I still think they're very good for kids. Started buying them. No, bro, you can't. Just because someone puts out a Ninja Turtle product doesn't mean you got to have it. I feel that way about NECA right now. Do I have to abandon that? We can't have it all. I found this article. It's from 2017. It's on a website called Geek Dad. I'll have the link to this article in the description. The title was Collection Control 10 Tips to Tame Your Hoard. And the first 5 are ones that I think apply to here when we think about how do we have an end point in our collection, or how do we complete a collection. Number 1, stop thinking of your collection as an investment. I think this is a great tip. A lot of us view our collection as an investment. We're going to retire off of it. Or we're going to give it to our kids one day and they're going to either sell it or they're going to want to play for it. Almost all of those things don't come true. Almost all of those things don't come true. For all of the original scratch, mock, Ninja Turtles card, or original Star Wars figures or whatever, there are literally tens of thousands of figures that never had any value later. And now in the modern time, if you're buying modern stuff, these things are being produced by the tens, if not hundreds of thousands. They're not going to have any true value that matters when you factor in keeping it, storage space, all the stuff you got to do for 30 years to wait to see. Certainly some things could be a quick short-term investment, especially with the COVID boom. People will oversell stuff, flip stuff, whatever. But that's calming down right now. And just if you view it as an investment, you're always going to hoard it and not look at it as a collection. So I try not to look at this as an investment. Sure, it's worth money. Sure, I could turn it into money if I needed to. But I want to view it as a collection. Number 2, set limits, rules for yourself. Like we talked about, I only collect comic Marvel Legends characters. Right now, if G.I. Joe Classified changes their name and becomes something else, I'll be done. I'll be done. If Super 7 stops making Ninja Turtles, I'll stop collecting. I won't collect whatever derivative that comes after that. I have very clear rules. If another company comes out with 6-scale Lord of the Rings figures, like Art, who looks like they're making incredible Lord of the Rings figures, I'm not going to buy them. I buy the Asmus Lord of the Rings collection because that's the collection I've invested into and I don't need another one. It's the way I'm treating it. Number 3, quality over quantity. I need to do better about this. I've thought about this with my sneaker collection, with my cologne collection, things like that. I'd rather have 10 amazing items than 100 average items. And so I'm going to try to trade up. I'm going to try to trade a massive stuff for a rarer thing. But even when you're collecting, go for the things that really mean something to you, the grails, the not so common. And it allows you for sustainability. The thing for me the most that is right now, Knickerbocker Lord of the Rings. Some of the rarest and hardest to get Lord of the Rings merchandise. We get maybe 1 or 2 a year, maybe 1 or 2 a year. But they mean so much to me and are worth so much. So rather than have 1,000 diamond Lord of the Rings figures, I'd rather have 1 Knickerbocker Lord of the Rings figure. Avoid triggers. A lot of the things we talked about. FOMO. Other people that encourage you to overspend. Social media. Avoid those triggers so that your collection doesn't get out of the way. And then number 5, I think this is the most important. Migrate toward the meaningful items, not completing a thing. Collect the things that are the most meaningful to you, not just because something is cool or good or new. Because, I go back to the original statement, most of us probably don't have a true endpoint in collecting because we enjoy collecting more than we do our collection. And so we're always going to acquire and collect things. So we need to collect them less often and make them more meaningful when we collect them. You can have things like space. What about space? If I said only this wall, that's the only place I can put my collections ever, I'd probably do a lot better. I'd turn things over. You got to have others help you and not enable you to have space everywhere. You need help from that. Give yourself a self space, rein it in. And the final statement for this week. Redefine what you want your collection to be. Not anyone else. Not the stores, not the marketings, not the new brands, not social media, not YouTube influencers. You. What do you want your collection to be based on what you like and is meaningful to you? We may never stop collecting. We may never finish our collection, but we can make it a lot more meaningful. That's how we can make sure that collecting isn't bad. And I believe that. Next week, we're going to wrap this series up and start to go into the next direction of Is Collecting Good? I appreciate everybody, all the support on this journey so far, and I look forward to wrapping it up next week. Talk to you then.